Tonight we continue a series of interviews with candidates for Suffolk County District Attorney. Our guest has experience as a defense attorney and a reentry program manager. We'd like to welcome Shannon McAuliffe. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
I want to go back a little bit, Shannon, to your decision to run because it took place before the current DA, Dan Conley, decided not to run again.
Correct, it did.
What prompted you to do that?
I really took it upon myself to look at the system around me that I'd been in and working in since I was really 21 years old and see that we had had a DA for 16 years and the gap between what we were doing as a county and what we should be doing in criminal justice reform was deep, far, and wide. It didn't look like anybody else was going to be running, so I made the decision to run against Dan Conley. Everybody told me it would be too hard and uncomfortable and I shouldn't be, really going against the status quo. But this is what I thought was right, and I think it's really important to have a DA who can make the decision of what's right even under really difficult circumstances, and that's what I did.
I want to go back even further. Right after you get out of college, you volunteer and you worked with a public defender. What did you learn from that?
I did. So I worked with the King County Public Defender in Seattle my first year out of college. My job was to go interview people who were stuck in jail because they couldn't pay bail. And I was, 21 years old, going, deep into jails and talking to people and really seeing face to face what they were challenged with. When people are caught in jail when they can't pay their bail, they're brutally penalized before they're ever even convicted. So I saw people losing something as simple as their car, but that could have disastrous effects, their jobs, their housing. Sometimes people even lost their children. And I thought, if we have a system that is criminalizing poverty and keeping people in jail when they haven't even been convicted and having this disastrous effect, that's bad for public safety. Public safety, we're all better when somebody is working and has a job and close to the things that are making them strong. And if we want to really encourage public safety and encourage law-abidingness, then we need to start doing things that will keep people strong, especially people who don't need to be in jail, like people who are in on bail. So
some of those tripwires have been straightened out through criminal justice reforms around the country, including here in Massachusetts. But what about some of those remaining tripwires? Talk about those and tell me what you'd like to do about them.
I think bail is still a huge issue. A lot of people don't know that bail is only meant to motivate people to show up to court. And what's happened is we've been setting bail for people who don't have any money, so it's not a motivator. And people therefore are in jail before they've ever been convicted of any crime. That's something that Dan Conley has said that he has agreed in reforming, but I haven't seen it bear out in the courts at all. People are still being held, still being penalized before they're convicted. So as DA, I would drastically change what we are doing with bail. For example, with misdemeanors, not asking for cash bail. And for other offenses, if we have issues with people showing up at court, really going to smart alternatives, things like using text messages. Even if somebody has a really hard time coming into court, we could use something like GPS monitoring. But there are many options well before keeping somebody in jail day in, day out for days, weeks, and months just to make sure that they're showing up in court. So that's one big issue.
Now, you've been working with ex-offenders, young people, maybe they've been involved with gangs as well, at the program known as Roca. You're trying to steer them in the right direction. What did you learn from that you could bring into being a better DA?
I learned that we have cast such a large, disastrous net and caught people up in the system that don't need to be caught up in it. When young men, 17 to 24, are just coming out of jail, they need a lot of help. And if we can give them that help up front, we can avoid them becoming offenders later on. So listen, everybody you put in jail is going to get out. Unless we jail people for the rest of their lives, people are going to get out. We need to decide what we're going to do when they come out. A program like Roca takes really the highest risk young men and intervenes in their life in a way that they can turn away from crime and to the things that make them strong. So I learned that with a heavy push and with a lot of support and with a program that doesn't require somebody to be ready, willing, or able, because some people aren't ready, willing, or able, But if you can build trust with them and then use that trust to push behavior change, you can help them turn away from crime, which is, of course, what the criminal justice system is designed to do, but doesn't do very well through jail, but can be done through small alternatives like programs such as Roca. Roca is for very high-risk young men, but there are lots of other programs that will fill that gap that people need so that they don't go back to jail and they don't continue victimizing people.
And programs like that, if I got this right, you're not just offering somebody something and expecting to take advantage of it. Sometimes you got to be labor intensive and really give personalized attention to them, don't you?
Absolutely. With prosecuting, people relentlessly go after people to prosecute them, and that is right in many instances. But with change, so many people have been hurt by the system and don't have a lot of the tools that they need, that if we show that same relentlessness in trying to help somebody turn around, they can actually turn around. I mean, there are young men at Roca who have been in the program for 2 years or more. 79% have no arrests for any new offense. That's a dramatic number. And it just goes to show that if we put this effort on the front end that is much less expensive than jail, we can actually avoid jail, avoid the cost, and improve the community and safety because we have people working instead of committing crimes.
This has been on News. We're talking with Shannon McAuliffe, candidate for Suffolk County District Attorney. Shannon, one of the things that you support is raising the age at which adult jurisdiction comes into play for a criminal case. Why should it be older?
Well, the juvenile justice system is based on the fact that young people's brains are not as mature as adults, and therefore they need a little bit of an extra helping hand to get out of some of the trouble they've gotten into. I would never want to be judged at what I did when I was 17, 18, or 19. Right now, I would make much better decisions as an older person. But if the justice system, and especially the juvenile justice system, is designed to recognize that young people are different, and therefore jail isn't going to have the same deterrent effect. In fact, it could really demolish people who otherwise could become successful in the world, then it doesn't make sense to just stop it right at 18 years old. That's an arbitrary number that we decided a really long time ago. But nothing magical happens from 17 to 18. And if what we really want to get to is rehabilitation and accountability, and again, this is really coming back to public safety because we all want safety and security in our neighborhoods. The way we get that is by engaging in practices that will help people turn away from crime. And so if we raise the age, we'll then allow a system to help somebody get out of the brutality of an adult system when they're still so young that they're able to be rehabilitated. That's the other thing about brain science is, one, it makes you very impulsive, but the other is you are much more easily rehabilitated, right? Because your mind is in that place where you can really learn a lot. And so we want to capture that moment where we can help somebody really become stronger and get them up and out of the system as opposed to in and down into the system, which will just cause more crime.
We have a new poll of public opinion with a lot of people of color having little confidence in the police and the courts, and in some cases even less in the courts. How would you change that?
Well, it's really about recognizing the systemic racism and the systemic injustice that's baked into every pressure point in our system. This is about saying, we can say, well, the world is inequitable, and therefore we're just going to prosecute who's in front of us, or say, these inequities simply cannot play out in our courtrooms. This is where the rubber hits the road. This is where people's freedom is in jeopardy, and this is where the bedrock of public safety occurs.
Part of it is you got to let people feel that they're going to be safe dealing with the court system too, not just treated as equals.
Yes, and I think that what happens is if when somebody enters the court system, if with the prosecutor's office having a culture of sort of winning at all odds, what happens is they stack up the odds at all points, right? At the charging decision, at asking for a high bail, at perhaps overcharging. And that's why people feel that they haven't been dealt with fairly. And what has happened is the injustice that happens in the world has been coming in and invading the courtroom, and that simply shouldn't be. And so this is really about recognizing it, determining which parts of the system need to change and how prosecutors react to that, educating, pushing against it, training against it, and ensuring that those inequities don't determine your fate in prosecution.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you very much.
Shannon McAuliffe, candidate for Suffolk County District Attorney.